podcast will be on the spinal cord, associated nerves with the spinal cord, reflexes, all those kind of things. And can be found on your nerve sheet, lecture notes, on page 3 on Moodle. Also, you want to look at the pictures on Moodle, the official pictures, because on the back of one of these sheets, you can actually see the spinal nerves. It's the same picture that's in your lab pack and your lab book. And so basically here they are in color, very nice. And so I would definitely look at some of these pictures if you want to. And then also it shows you the nerves and how they branch. And so the term for branching is plexus, okay? A nerve plexus means branching, becoming smaller, and forming a group of them. All right, so you can go through there. And a lot of your nerves are going to be named for bones, landmarks, muscles, and blood vessels, right? As you look at some of the names of some of these nerves. Now, we do not have a nerve man to memorize. There are nerve men out there, but I don't think it's necessary. And a lot of them very, very detailed and hard to remember, okay? All right, so now also on your official picture sheet, there's some nice pictures of the spinal cord cut in half right here, and then our reflex pattern right down here. And that's also in your lab book pages. All right, so now let's go to the board and talk about the spinal cord. And so the first thing we need to talk about are the spinal nerves coming off of the spinal cord, and they are named for the various vertebrae. And so we have 7 cervical spinal nerves coming out on the right and left side. We have 12 thoracics coming out. Basically, remember, those go to the rib cage. And then we have the lumbar, there's 5, sacral 5, and then the coccyx is going to have 1 nerve come down to it. And so in the lumbar area and in the sacral area, the nerves sort of fan out. They sort of fan out and become longer. And somebody named this pattern of longer nerves coming out in the lumbar and sacral area. They thought it looked like a horsetail. So they called the pattern for these nerves cauda equina. And so cauda means tail, equina means horse, so horsetail. And so that's nice. And then there's 1 nerve that comes straight down into the coccyx, okay? And the coxal nerve is called filum terminale, just 1. And it's going to go right through the little bitty coccyx. And so filum terminale is the last nerve in your spinal cord, okay? All right, now we're going to go over here and look at a piece of the spinal cord. And it all looks the same, and the gray matter is in the inside here. It's brown, and it makes like a butterfly pattern, okay? We saw that in the histology slides. And so this is the gray matter, and we have a name for this area. This is called the right dorsal horn and the left dorsal horn. So we don't call them wings like a butterfly. They're called horns, okay? This area is a horn, dorsal horn, and this is another dorsal horn, left dorsal horn. And then we have 2 sets of horns down below. We have right and left ventral horns. So that's like the second pair of wings on a butterfly. So that is made out of gray matter. Gray matter makes our butterfly or our horns. Then the white matter is going to surround all this, white matter. And so I just put it with orange right here. White matter is going to be around it, around the gray matter, okay? Then we have right here, anterior and dorsal to the wings, to superior to it. CSF is being made in your spinal canal, okay? So the spinal canal right here with simple QBT cells is making the CSF, which will feed nerve tissue right there. And we'll talk about CSF a little bit later. All right, now the nerves. What do we call the nerves that run into and run out of the spinal cord, the entire length of it? And so the nerves bringing electricity into, the impulse into the spinal cord, these nerves are called dorsal root nerves. Dorsal root nerves, and they are sensory in function, also called afferent nerves. So they're coming into the spinal cord, okay? And then when they turn around and come out, They're called ventral root nerves. Ventral root nerves. And so these are going to be motor nerves. Motor or efferent nerves, right? Motor or efferent. So they're going to bring the electricity out to the organ to tell it what to do, okay? Tell it what to do. So sensory means it just noticed something and it needs to bring it into the brain to figure out what it needs to do with it. And then when the electricity comes back down and comes out the ventral root, it's going to tell the organ what to do about this particular situation. So electricity goes up, your impulse goes up. When it comes into the dorsal horn, it goes up to the brain, and then basically there are neurons that basically will turn it around up there on the top, and those are called interneurons, okay? Interneurons, and so they're red right up here, so they're turning the electricity around, and then the electricity will come back down like this and connect right here. The electricity comes down on these, and so these are called ventral horn nerves because they're taking the electricity out to the organ to tell it what to do, okay? It's going to have some sort of effect on it right there. So those are the interneurons that turn the electricity around. The dorsal go up, turns it around, you turn, and then come back down out the ventral right there. It's the same on both sides, right and left sides, all right? So that's how your electricity runs in and out of the spinal cord. And so I can put one more, take this green down here and hook it right there. And so it goes up and down to wherever it needs to go in the brain, and then brings that electricity back down and brings about a change in these organs, right? All right, so that is how the whole spinal cord works. It's a very easy system. It's sort of like a railroad track. It's separated. Remember, electricity can only go one way, and then it's got to be turned around and come back out on another set of nerves, right? So now let's talk about CSF. Just as a quick reminder, CSF is called cerebrospinal fluid, okay? Cerebrospinal fluid, and it's made in the brain and in the spinal canal. And in the brain, Lucy T actually makes it. It's called the choroid plexus. And so it's made in your ventricles, the spaces of the brain. And so it's the exact same material. It's the exact same liquid, but it's just different, made by different tissues. So in the brain, it's made by Lucy T. And in the spinal canal, it's made by simple QBT cells, which are called ependymal cells. The ependymal cells. And so cerebrospinal fluid will feed the nerve tissue, and also helps maintain the pressure up inside the area of the brain and the ventricles. And here it's made out of water, high water, lots of lipoproteins, and lipo means fat, and it always has a neutral pH of around 7. Okay, so that's CSF. Now we're going to talk about reflexes associated with the spinal cord and the spinal nerves. And so there's nice pictures in the book, lab book, of course. And then also on your official picture sheet, right underneath the cross section of the spinal cord, here's a little summary picture, same as in the book, of simple and complex reflexes right there. And I'm going to go over it. And also it's on your note sheet, page 5, right, lecture note sheet. So there you go. All right, so now we're going to talk about, there's two kinds of reflexes, all right? And so simple versus complex, all right? So let's do the simple first, because obviously they're much easier. So what it means is it's talking about how the electricity goes into the spinal cord, and then where does it go once it gets into the spinal cord. So simple reflexes go into the spinal cord, they find an interneuron, and they whip around and they go right out of the spinal cord. Very, very fast. And so you have an immediate reaction with this kind of reflex. What are some examples of simple reflexes? The knee jerk, or the patellar one. When you hit it just right, it jerks. Hot and cold touch, so when you touch something hot and cold, you immediately know that. And then plantar toe curls. And so when you go down the middle of the foot, bottom of the foot, then the toes should curl, and that is always checked in newborns, absolutely, as well as the patellar is always checked in newborns so that they can see that the nerves are running all the way down to the foot. So if I do this on my picture over here that I saved, and so here is a simple reflex. So an organ, say you just touch something right here, this is your skin, oh my gosh, you just touched something. So it's gonna come in my dorsal root right here, and then it's gonna catch an interneuron right here. An interneuron is gonna be right here, and it's gonna turn it around. It doesn't need to go up to the brain to react because you need an immediate response. And then it's gonna come out and it's gonna tell you, take your finger off the hot stove, and you're gonna pull it off. So that's an immediate millisecond response. So you gotta catch an interneuron right here in the middle, in between the horns right there. The interneurons will turn it around and send it out the ventral root, bam, right to the organ where you just touched. And that is a simple reflex. All right, now for a complex reflex, well, the medulla and the pons up in the brain, the middle part of the brain, have to be involved, okay? And so to do this, I think I'll use baby blue right here. And so complex reflexes, the impulse goes into the spinal cord, it's going in, and then it has to go up to the brain, and it's either gonna go to the medulla or it goes on to the pons, okay? So the medulla comes first and then the pons. And so then in one of these two organs, it catches an interneuron, it turns it around, and then it goes back out and down the spinal cord, okay? So that is a complex reflex. So it takes an area of the brain to create the reaction, tell you what the reaction is going to be. So the pons here, I listed these. The pons does the pupil size reflex, and then the blinking, how many times you blink, is controlled by the pons. The hearing is a reflex, so your tympanic membrane will vibrate at certain levels depending upon the quality of tone it's listening to. And then touch sensors, also in the skin, are responsible, can be regulated by the pons also. All right, then medulla oblongata. The medulla oblongata does all the other senses. Big senses for complex reflexes. And so coughing, gagging, saliva, the amount of saliva you make is actually a complex reflex. Sneezing, tears, and hiccups. And so all of these are regulated by or produced by the medulla oblongata. And so what I would do, I'd go over on the other side and say, here comes a response, okay? So you need to make more saliva. So basically, you're gonna send electricity in here, and then you're gonna send it up, all the way up here, because this is a complex. And you need to make more saliva, so it's gotta go to the medulla. And in the medulla, it's gonna turn around with an interneuron, and then it comes out, and then it's gonna bring electricity in here and say, hey, produce more saliva. We need more saliva. Your mouth is getting dry, okay? And so that's how that's gonna work. So simple and complex can come from both sides. Both sides, it doesn't matter. And so this is just showing you the example of simple, just turns around right here and the spinal cord and goes out. And then a complex is going to come in, go up the dorsal nerve, turn around with the interneuron, come down the ventral horn nerve, and then come out right there to the organ to produce a reaction. All right, so now there's just a few more miscellaneous terms you should know with the spinal cord and spinal nerves. And so a lot of your nerves are named for bones, landmarks, blood vessels, and muscles that they're going to be around or running through in the area. And then with the term plexus means that nerves split and branch and become smaller, right, just like blood vessels. All right, and then the biggest nerve in the human body is your sciatic nerve. It's on the back side of your thigh, and it's made out of 5 nerves. Lumbar 4 and 5, sacral 1, 2, and 3. So it's a huge one right here coming through the joint area. And so that's the sciatic nerve. So when you have extreme pain in the buttocks area, gluteal area, it's usually sciatica, right? And then a femoral nerve is the second largest nerve in the human body, and it's on the front side of your thigh. And so the femoral is made out of only three, lumbar 2, 3, and 4 make up that huge nerve, right? So the biggest sciatic, second is femoral. All right, and so we can go on listing them, but you don't need to know that. But those are the two biggies in the legs and overall in the human body, right? And then the last thing you might want to look up, and I have this on your sheet on page 5 at the bottom, it says referred pain maps or referred pain sites. And so a lot of times doctors use these, and there's no example in your lab book or lecture book of referred pain sites. There used to be, but not anymore. This is what's used extensively in medicine, because sometimes when your gallbladder hurts underneath your right scapula, you might not feel it there. It might be the nerves are going to send the pain to your heart, and you might think you're having a heart attack where it's really just a gallstone attack, right? A gallbladder issue. And so those are called referred pain sites. So it gets your attention that something's wrong because you're not paying attention to the original site of pain. And so you might want to Google referred pain maps because it's really interesting. So if you have ovaries that are having issues, you'll feel it around your umbilical area. Not down here, yes you will, but then if you just ignore it, then it's going to start to have pain right here, and you might think, oh, it's my large intestine or something associated with the stomach, but the stomach goes up higher, so that would not be correct. But anyway, look up referred pain maps, just because it's very interesting to see these, and you might want to do an article on those, right? Okay, so that's it for the spinal cord.